you'll know, most products are made in China.
Yeah. How many of you have Apple products or anything like that? Because all of those are manufactured and made in China, as well as most of the clothes and technology that you have. Does anybody have any Nike products? Most Nike products are outsourced and made in China.
So doing business in China is not really a choice these days.
All right. Some economic benefits of outsourcing your business to China is there are lower taxes, government subsidies, and the GDP. This graph is from 2001, and it shows how China is in between India and France in their average GDP in trillions of dollars. But then it's estimated due to all the outsourcing and all of the money that the country begins to bring in through all the products that are being built there, that in 2008, it will be almost as high as Germany's GDP. And China's rapid growth, as compared to the United States, 2009 projection, the United States is projected to have 46,000, and China is projected to have 3,556, but the percentage of growth is 536%, as opposed to the U.S. is 61%. So that means that China's business is growing by a lot more than U.S. business is growing. Like China has such a high population that there are 4 to 6 million new car owners every year. They graduate between 3 and 5 million engineers each year, engineers and technicians each year from their schools, and that number's only growing due to their rapid population. Now here's a political cartoon. This man is just sitting there, and this is like he's from the olden days where there were a lot of factories in the United States, and he's saying, in my day, we had tariffs to stop things like these, but now tariffs are being lowered so that outsourcing is becoming a lot more popular as countries can take their products as companies can take their products to different countries to make more money and have the stuff made for less. Like in China, the wages can be like, they can pay them $1 a day. Here we have a minimum wage, but in those countries there isn't much of a minimum wage.
Alright, the geographic benefits of doing business in China. As most of us already know, labor is more affordable and accessible in China, so that will lower production costs and in turn lower prices. Also in China, they're moving now towards a stage 4 demographic transition model, which basically means that the middle class is becoming larger, increasing the workforce, and also the workers are becoming more skilled. Farmers and other labor positions are becoming more educated and working in these more technical positions. Also, infrastructure improvements. Recently, China just built the Three Gorges Dam, which is a giant hydroelectric dam. This decreased their greenhouse gas effects, and right now it produces 11 times as much power as the Hoover Dam, which is pretty impressive. Growth of domestic markets. Right now in China, it used to be a traditional consumer market. Now people are not just exporting these goods, but China is actually starting to consume some of these Apple and Nike products, which are being produced in China. So it's becoming more of a popular culture where people are actually buying these products. And this cartoon down here, this is actually a real thing. There were actually 10 workers that jumped off one of the factories there and killed themselves.
As we know, in China there are severe environmental issues such as air pollution and water pollution, which has increased cancer rate and as well infant mortalities. China has a pretty corrupt banking system. 40% of their GDP goes into their state-owned banks, which funnels into their state-owned enterprises, so they're making local revenue off other people's money. And small businesses are dying, and big businesses are growing. So all the money is like in one place. They're not spreading the wealth. This also causes a lack of social safety nets. A lot of China's workers are being laid off, and they don't have any benefits from the government, and they can't, like, they basically have to save more than they were to spend. Also, the size of China is also expanding, whereas they set a law where you can only have one child, and this is causes overpopulation, where like factories are being like bunched together, and isn't a safe environment for the people.
Some other risks include the dominance of state-owned factories. As we know, China is a communist country, so that a lot of the privately owned companies and stuff who try and set up shop and make a factory there won't get the type of money and stuff that the state-owned factories do. And then intellectual property theft is another big risk in China, as I think the U.S. estimated that they lost like $300 billion per year in property theft, and it said that about 50 to 80% of that is estimated to come from China. And then the biggest issue in China is probably the management. They put a lot of emphasis on high-up management. They don't have any middle management, so there's not like, it's mainly just a manager and then labor workers. There's no middle. And they use management mainly as a method of communication. And an example of how that management how weak it was when the SARS outbreak occurred. There was no like communication between companies and stuff, so they had trouble fixing the outbreak.
And as you just said, management is a major issue, so methods of interaction is very important for how you do business in China. And like I mentioned earlier, understanding how to do business in China is going to be very important for the future, at least for the foreseeable future, if not for the rest of our foreseeable lives, because they are the fastest growing economy in the world, and they're set to overtake us as the most powerful country in the world. So, three primary phases if you're going to move a company and set a foundation in China. One of those is going to be entry. First step in there, got to make it a strong step. Early on in the early 80s, 90s, when China was still opening up its markets, companies like Nike, Intel, Dell, all of those companies had a tougher time getting into the markets, one, because of politics, and then two, because of understanding how the country had worked and changing its methods of working. So, establishing good connections with politicians and factory owners, setting your brand and making sure that you are a known brand and a strong brand in that country. And then having a solid foundation of operations means finding good factories and good management. Country development, that's where all the heavy footwork comes in. That means you're going to have to do the hard work of finding managers who are good, who are actually going to do the work, who are going to keep the workers happy, keep them from jumping off roofs, don't want that. And then third and final is going to be global integration. So once you've established yourself in China, continuing your strength as a company in China means unveiling into the markets that China itself is trying to target as well. This will be better for trade routes for both you and China. Means more strength politically. And also is going to result in Chinese government being a little more helpful when it comes to, say, reducing regulations on your factories' output pollutants, wage issues. Recently in the New York Times, there was actually a 1,000-man strike for the smaller factory, not to mention some of the bigger ones that have happened recently, simply because the factory changed companies. These strikes don't happen if the Chinese government comes in and says, this company may be the new company in the factory, but you're going to respect it just as well. So taking all of these ideas into account when and probably when you are definitely going to be doing business in China are very important.